Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Journey to Happiness. As always, welcome. If you're new here, I welcome you to this community. And I'm just so excited that you guys decided to tune into this episode today. Tonight I am recording this the night before, of course. I went to a somatic breathwork release ceremony. So amazing. They're always amazing. I've been to them before, but not this group, and actually not in person. I've always been on Zoom. It was amazing. And it got me thinking more about trauma, because we had the conversations about trauma tonight. And it got me thinking more about it. And I talk a lot about trauma on this podcast. And I talk about spiritual awakenings. And I talk about the healing journey. And I talk about how trauma and heal, or not trauma and healing, but healing and awakenings are basically one and the same. And because when you're going through a healing journey, you almost can't help but rely on your spirituality, which leads you to have like more of a spiritual awakening journey. And if you're going through a spiritual awakening journey, then you are also going to go through a healing journey because you can't have one without the other. So it's why I talk about them so much on this podcast. And I was talking tonight and it got me thinking a lot about how people can get very triggered when you talk about generational trauma. We had that conversation tonight, and it's something I've talked about before. It is something I hold near and dear to my heart because I think even though like the whole world is starting to talk about it now, it's like I think for some of us it's really hard to admit that we have stuff to deal with and traumas to heal from. And the nervous system holds on to things, the body holds on to things. We all know this. I've talked about that before. you know, it's one of the reasons we have diseases, that and of course the poison we put in our bodies, but that's a podcast for another episode. And it got me thinking about my own healing journey. And I've talked about a little bit of this on the podcast before, but I'm going to talk about it again. So it's time for a little story time with Chrissy for the evening because I think for a lot of us, we don't realize that we have trauma to deal with. We don't realize we have anything to heal from. We look at healing as like, oh, I healed from this breakup that happened, or I healed from this situation that happened, but we don't think about healing in the same terms as like a spiritual healing, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is like when you're actually healing the inside parts of you that aren't on the surface. Your nervous system regulation, your body, your subconscious mind. And I remember when I first started my healing journey and my awakening journey, I first discovered that I needed like help when I realized that I had anxious attachment. And that led me down every fucking rabbit hole you can go down, right? Because I was like searching. And I remember in my head it was really hard for me because I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, I had a good childhood. I had a good life. I had parents who were together, who gave me what I needed. And I'm sorry if this triggers some people out there because I know that not everybody had it that way. But the point of the story again to talk about is that I didn't think I had anything to heal from because I was like, my parents were good, like all these things. But as I went down all these rabbit holes discovering anxious attachment and what it entails, I uncovered memories, and I think the memories were always there. I just didn't understand how they were affecting my life because well, let me just finish the story, then I'll tell you what I was going to say. But these memories were affecting my life because, you know, I've talked about it before, but I'll just briefly reiterate. Yeah, I had parents who were there, but I also had a father who worked a lot of swing shifts and who liked his sports on TV and who, we would do things together, but sometimes we wouldn't, but I would think we were going to. Like we would make plans and then he would come home or whatever, wake up and he would say, I'm too tired or, whatever, or I forgot, okay, we can't do this today. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out where my trauma came from and what ended up happening. It ended up that I believed I wasn't worthy for anybody to keep a promise to. I believed that, men couldn't be trusted because everything they said was just a lie. Like they never did what they said they were going to do. So therefore, I went through life dating the exact same type of men over and over and over, not realizing what the fuck I was doing to myself. This is trauma. Okay. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. So for the longest time, I didn't think that like I had any trauma in my life. And until I went on the healing journey and the spiritual awakening journey. And then I realized what had, where all this came from. And then, of course, I went the opposite way because then I was fucking pissed at my parents. And I was like, there was a time I didn't even want to talk to them because I was like, you guys fucked me up, like whatever. Uh, of course, I've gotten through all of that now because as you go on this path, you do start to realize that, first of all, your parents were doing the best they could. That's the number one thing that we all have to remember that, how they raised you, it directly correlates to how they were raised, whether it's the exact same or whether it's the opposite. It could be the opposite because they're doing the opposite of what was done to them because they don't want you to turn out like they did. So they like do the opposite. But either way, it's all stemming from how they were raised. So that's the first step is like understanding that they did the best they could. And then the second thing is as I went on this spiritual awakening path and this healing journey, going through all of this simultaneously, because that's how it works. That's how it works for most of us. I, then discovered or I figured out that not only were they doing the best they could, but they fucking loved me so much that they decided to come here on Earth and play that part in my life because these were the lessons I was supposed to learn in this lifetime. So that's another aspect of all of this is understanding that, like, first of all, what happened to you was not your fault. And everybody that was raising you was doing the best they could. But even if you had some major trauma, even if you were abused, even if you grew up in a chaotic household, any of that stuff, understanding that like we chose that before we came here, which is something I believe in 1,000%. I believe that we have to choose these paths before we come here because the whole point of coming here is to learn and to grow. And so we have to choose the lessons we're going to learn. And that's what they are. They're not I don't mean trauma as lessons, but like we have to choose that trauma so that we can learn lessons later in life, so that we can like evolve and be like, oh, okay, I learned this. And like, no, I really am fucking worthy. I am worthy of love and I am worthy of these things. And just this situation from my childhood made me believe otherwise. But no, I really am worthy of love. And so it's like about remembering that. So I hope that makes sense to everyone out there. So that is something I've been thinking about a lot lately because I know that a lot of people have also been going through a lot of shit this summer. And again, I think, that is where these lessons kind of come in because we're always going through lessons and we have to pass one lesson before we can move on to the next, and it's like, I don't know. It's just it all fascinates me so much. So I hope I like and be able to verbalize it to you guys because it makes so much sense to me, all of it. Like the spirituality, the healing, the traumas, like everything makes so much sense to me. And I want it to make sense to you guys too because I want to help you and I want you to like understand like why things in your life are happening. So another example of this could be like, why do you keep meeting the same people, right? Why are you meeting the same people over and over again? And why are you having the same situations in your life happen? Like, so you're meeting the same guy as far as relationships, you're meeting the same friends. You change jobs constantly because your boss is a bitch and you keep running into the same situation. Your boss is always a bitch, or, your friends are always leaving, or there's some situation that's always happening in your life. Why is this? And I think so many of us ask this question, like, why is this? And this is really hard for people to understand. But the truth of the matter is that the reason this is happening is because something in your nervous system, that's what the type of people you're meeting and the situations that are happening to you are a sense of familiarity. They're a sense of safety, even if you're not really safe, even if it sucks what's happening, and even if you don't want what's happening to be happening, like you're meeting the same kind of people and you don't want to be, there's something about them that feels familiar, and they're just reflecting back to you the way you're really feeling about yourself. So if you don't feel worthy, then you're going to meet people who also don't make you feel worthy. You're going to meet people who are just reflecting, they're literally, humans are like a mirror. You're just going to meet people who are just constantly like making you feel bad about yourself or cheating on you or talking to other women because that's how you're feeling about yourself. And a lot of that is because, you know, that's what was done to you as a child. Whether it was intentional or not, and whether it was like you, again, you might have had a really, really good childhood like I did. Or, in your head, you were like thinking that you had this good childhood. But when you actually get underneath the surface and you do the work to figure out what's really going on under there, you will find these little tidbits, these little, like, I had a vision, I had kind of forgotten that I had this vision like a few years back about me standing by the back door crying because I wanted to go to this haunted house with my dad, and he had told me we was gonna go, and then he like got up after sleeping or something from working the night before, and then he decided he was too tired and he wasn't going to take me. And I remember like this vision of me standing by the back door crying. So like they come in these little tidbits, and you have to be willing to accept them and be like, oh, that's why this was happening. So, in my case, like I was meeting the same kind of people that I was around when I was little. Not that, again, my dad is one of my best friends now. Like we are the closest ever. But back then, he was doing the best he could. He didn't know about trauma. He didn't know what he was doing or what was going on. So, he was just doing the best he could. But it obviously wasn't meeting my needs. So I grew up to meet other people who were also not going to meet my needs because they felt safe and familiar, even though they weren't fucking safe, right? But they were familiar. They were just like the situations I had as a child, and your nervous system wants familiarity. It also wants proof, okay? So if you have a belief that you're not worthy and that you're unlovable, your nervous system and your fucking brain goes, okay, like let's just show her that she's right. If she believes she's not worthy, we're going to show her that she's not worthy. And they're going to do that by bringing people into your life who are going to treat you a certain way, who make you feel like you're not worthy. It is something within you that is directing these people into your life and letting you meet them. Now, it doesn't mean that the trauma you experience is your fault, because it is not your fault. And that's the first step you have to become aware of. It is not your fault. But when you become aware of the trauma and you become aware of the fact that you're not fucking healed, because like I don't think anybody's ever completely healed. I think we always are healing and growing. And I believe as soon as we heal from one thing, then it's the next thing that comes up. Even if we think that we don't have anything to heal from, we're always like on a journey of healing, right? So you have to become aware of that first. You have to have acceptance of that. And once you do, then you can start to get underneath the surface and be like, okay, why am I attracting these people into my life? Now that I know that there's something there, like, what am I going to do with this information? Because I have to do something with it. Because if I don't, I'm going to keep meeting the same damn people over and over and over. So, oh, it's important. It's so important. And again, I think this is really hard for people. And it's almost like a trigger for people, especially when you tell them, like, well, you chose this, or when you get really esoteric, like I am, and you're like, oh, well, you chose to come here and experience this. And your dad, like, you know, his soul loved you so much that he chose to come in and play this part. Like, sometimes it's really hard for people to grasp. And it's also really hard for people to grasp the fact that they even have trauma, especially if they grew up in a family that they thought was like really awesome, and they felt like their needs were met. Because a lot of times I feel like we think of our needs being met as our physical needs. We're like, well, we were fed, we had good clothes on our back, we had a nice house, we had a two-parent household. Like, oh, we're good. But our emotional needs are just as important as our physical needs. They really, really are. And I think so many people don't understand that. And many of us, if you're my age, I'm in my 40s. So many of us at this stage, like our parents are probably in their 70s. So they weren't talking about healing. They weren't talking about trauma. They were shoving everything down. They were worried. They were so worried about what was happening in the physical world because their parents, so the people our parents were raised by, came from a depression era. They came from the Great Depression. Those people lived through it. So the way they raised our parents was completely different. So then our parents took that on and raised us in similar fashions, or they went the complete opposite. And so again, it's not their fault because like they weren't talking about this stuff. People weren't talking like I mean, people weren't talking about therapy and trauma and God forbid you ever heard the word spiritual awakening. Like, really, back in the 80s and 90s? No. Like, who was talking about that? You went to fucking church, said your prayers, you repented for your sins, and you did all the I mean, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying like that's just a different era back then, right? They were worried about the different things than we are now. And like so anyway, I just think that in the last couple decades is when we really started talking about this. And so when we bring it up to our parents or we try to talk to them about it, it's like they just shut us down. And you have to be okay with that. And you have to understand that, like, not everybody is meant to wake up in this lifetime, and not everybody is meant to heal in this lifetime. Now, it sucks for them because, again, this is my belief here, but my opinion is if they don't fucking heal their shit here and they haven't learned those lessons, then they're just going to come back and do it all over again because that's what I believe. I believe that we will come back because our soul is like multidimensional. It is everlasting. It doesn't die. Yeah, I definitely believe in heaven and I believe that we go there. Um, but I believe we go there for a time being and then we decide that we want to come back and we want to experience Earth again because, like, I don't know, it probably gets fucking boring, I imagine, right? Like to just sit in the afterworld. I mean, I'm sure it's beautiful, but like we don't really grow. Like we're growing here on Earth. It's like the best school on the planet, right? So anyway, I digress. But the point of all of this is, you know, the healing journey, it's not easy. It's not easy. I talk about it all the time. I talk about trauma all the time. And I just got to thinking about it more tonight when I did that breath work because I had so much energy trapped inside of my body. And that's where you have to release all of that because the trauma starts in conception. Like, I don't know if you know that. Like, I think a lot of people know that, but it's the truth. Somewhere between like 4 and 6 weeks, I think is where your nervous system and things start to form. So if you are pregnant and you're in an abusive relationship, that baby is absorbing all of that trauma and all of that stress that you are carrying, you know? So even if you don't remember your trauma, like if you ever have a situation, okay, where you're like throwing a tantrum and you're like, why the fuck am I throwing this tantrum? Like, it's stupid, but you can't stop. It's because you're being triggered by something in your nervous system is like yelling danger, danger, usually because there's just a situation happening that is triggering you of something that is reminiscent of your past. And it could be a past that you don't remember. It could have been something that happened when you were an embryo, when you were not even out of the womb yet. But that is what is going on in the nervous system and in your brain. So if you're meeting the same kind of people, like I've said, and I will keep continuing to say this, then there is something in your subconscious mind, somewhere in your nervous system. There is something going on underneath the surface, something that you are not aware of consciously that is, keeping you from to meeting these same people. And it's usually because you haven't learned like what you're supposed to be learning from them yet. So it's just the same person in a different body. And the cycle continues until you can break whatever is happening. So for me, this another example here, I just kept meeting the same types of men over and over and over. And, I thought like everything would be great, but then they would like eventually like leave, which a lot of that was my fault because I was a fucking crazy person because I had such anxious attachment issues. So I was like, so basically back to my trauma, like I had so many severe anxious attachment issues because of like, just thinking that like men couldn't keep promises and that they were always going to let me down. So therefore, whenever I got in a relationship, I would like act like a damn crazy person. Like, you're not texting me back in 5 minutes. What the hell? Like, what are you doing? literally crazy person. So what happened was I would drive them away so they would leave. Well, then my brain was like, "Oh, okay, see, you're right. You're right. Men can't be trusted. They always leave." So see, my brain needed proof. It needed proof. So like therefore, like I'm causing them to leave. Now my brain has proof. And it was just a cycle over and over and over again, you know? And I didn't know how to heal and I didn't love myself enough to understand any of this stuff. And it took me till I was like 40 fucking years old. So I'm hoping that maybe you're younger and you can hear this podcast and you can understand what I'm trying to tell you and I'm trying to preach to you about trauma and healing and the body and the emotions and the nervous system and the brain and the lessons that we're here to learn and the soul contracts that we signed before we got here. I hope you can comprehend all of it. And if you are older and my age, then it's never too fucking late, right? It's never too late to start learning and healing and growing and diving into all of this stuff, you know? So, oh gosh, I mean, I get so excited and I just hope that this reaches the people that it's meant to reach because I think it's so, so important. So, I'm trying to come up with ways to help people to like regulate this stuff. I mean, obviously, my suggestion, first of all, is to get a coach and to get a spiritual coach because um and there's a lot of coaches who offer like free content and stuff on YouTube and podcasts. I mean, I'm one of those. Like, there's a lot of us out here that do offer this information but I mean, I suggest if you can just get like an actual coach and a spiritual coach, because a lot of your spirituality people, they have a knack for kind of being able to talk to you and understand like where your blocks are and where your trauma lies. And so sometimes they can see things that you can't. Now, this is hard as a coach especially, but it can be hard for both parties because sometimes like the coach, the spirit, especially if they're like a spiritual coach, they can see the blocks and they can see the trauma and they kind of know like what you need to work on. But a lot of times the person, the actual client or whatever, they sometimes can't see it. So when the coach tells them like, well, you have a self-love issue or you have trauma that needs cleared or you have this or that, like they are very resistant and they're not accepting of what they're being told because they can't see it. So I suggest first of all you got to be ready and I suggest getting a coach. If you are fucking ready, I suggest finding a coach and going to that person. I also suggest breath work because breath work is amazing. I've done it before. I did it again tonight. It helps clear all the blockages. It helps move the energy through the body. It helps you release anything that's still stuck. EFT tapping is another really, really good one. I actually have an EFT tapping video. I'm probably going to make a new one though. That's going to be a little bit better. So if anybody's interested in that, please just let me know, hit me up, and you can send me your email and I will send you an EFT tapping video. EFT tapping is where you're basically tapping on meridian points up or like along your face and along like your head. And it's kind of like acupuncture, but without the needles. And that can really be a good nervous system reset for kind of changing some of your neural pathways in your brain. So that's really good. Of course, we've always got the good big favorites such as meditation and journaling. Those are always good for just getting down to the surface and finding out, what's wrong. But really, you need to start working on your nervous system regulation and working on getting to those subconscious beliefs if you really want to change your life because our subconscious brain is what's driving like 95% of our life. It's not the conscious brain, but we are operating from a conscious state. And so we're constantly like, on the surface, we might not be aware of certain things. So that's why things like meditation and things like breath work are so powerful. Hypnosis is another really powerful tool for removing some of those blockages. So, yeah, I mean, it's really powerful stuff, guys. And I just hope that this podcast finds the people it is meant to find. Yeah, I hope you guys have such a beautiful Monday. And as always, you can connect with me on Facebook. I definitely am trying. I'm looking into maybe trying to build a community over on the school platform. So I think that would be really cool for people just to come over there and be able to join with other like-minded individuals and hear about spirituality and share journeys with each other. That's not in the works yet. It's something I'm thinking about. So let me know if you are interested. And yeah, until next time, guys, like, I love you so much. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and for being here on this journey with me. as we all navigate this human experience that we are all living. So until next time, I love you guys so much. I will see you next week.